father's side were some of the first Baptist missionaries to the country of Brazil, in Mindanao. Before I was born, I was preceded by a brother, my brother Doug, and my father literally, as he wrote in one of his letters, worshipped the ground that my brother walked on. And a few years ago I discovered a correspondence from my father and my grandfather. It was actually a letter from my grandfather, and he said this: "Bob," that was my dad's name, he said, "I greatly fear for you, and I fear for your boy. For I've heard you say that you worship the ground that boy walks on. Our great God will not tolerate idols in the life of any man." My brother ran down the street one day and was run over by a car, and he was killed. And there's a real sense in which my dad also died with him. And he was everything for my father. And I grew up kind of in shadow of that. And it was very, very difficult, to be honest with you. It was extremely difficult. And so there on the farm, the ranch, my father was an unbeliever. There's one gift that he really gave me. He taught me how to work. He taught me how to work hard. As a matter of fact, when I was 12 years old, I was taken to the hospital, and I remember the doctor chewing out my father saying, "You're going to kill that boy. I've never seen a boy in this kind of condition, his back and everything else." Got to sucking him to heart. But you know, in a sense, it was really, really hard. But in a sense, it was one of the greatest gifts. I went to not a very good preschool or a very good high school, and I wasn't really a student who applied himself at all. But I remember when I went to college, my first year, first class, English class, they asked me to write a paragraph. That was the first assignment. I flunked it. I didn't know how to write a paragraph. But at the end of the semester, I had an A in the class. Why? Because the one thing my father had given me was work. You just work until you do it. That's all there is to it. And that's a good lesson also for the parents here today, that especially those who homeschool. I know we want to give our children Latin and calculus and all these different things, but the most important thing you can give your child is Christ and character. Give them character. They can accomplish anything. They can start at the bottom of the class, but they'll go forward if they're taught to work. My father was a person who really pushed me. I was not a very good athlete, but I was an athlete, and if I scored 20 points in a game, you could have scored 30. If I made a certain score in something, you could have done better, and this is how you could have done it. And it was always that. The glass was always seemed to be half empty. And it was really, really difficult. He was a very angry man, very powerful man, very strong man. He could be frightening. I saw my dad one time in a situation. 6 men approached him, got in an argument with him, and my father looked at all 6 of them and he went like this. He said, "You know me. I'll whip all 6 of you at one time. I'll do it right here, and you know I can do it." And they backed down. I mean, he was really something. But he was just always angry, always unfulfilled. No matter what happened, it just wasn't good enough. And you see that when you don't have Christ in your life, that's just the way it is. Nothing will ever satisfy a man except Christ. Our relationship was very, very difficult. I lived in a great deal of fear. And then when I was about 16 years old, it seemed like things started to change. My father and I began to have a better relationship. As a boy, I was always really small, the runt of the litter. I know I didn't live up to my older brother. But yet when I turned 16, it seemed like everything changed. I think I grew a foot that year, put on some weight, and I was more something that my father could be proud of. And so things were going well. And one day we were working on the ranch. I had just turned 17 and we were running wire. Now here in Rhode Island, you may not know what that is, but you take a big roll of barbed wire and you run a steel pole through it, and one man gets on one side and the other gets on the other, and you're running wire to build a fence for horses or cattle. And we're talking as we're walking along. We're even laughing. We're having a good time. And all of a sudden he screamed. And when he screamed, I caught him, and we both fell to the ground. And when I rolled him over, he was dead. He had died of a massive heart attack. Now, At that point, everything in my life changed. Everything. I wasn't a Christian, but I was kind of known as a good guy, you know. And within a matter of weeks, I would come to school drunk. I ended up getting kicked off the basketball team that I was captain of. Just all sorts of things. Now, people look at that and they'd say, wow, and they did. They looked at that and said, this poor kid. No, not at all. See, we've been taught to think he's a victim of his father's death. That's not true. My father's death gave my wicked flesh the opportunity to do what it had always wanted to do. There was no authority. I could just live now. I was getting bigger. I was getting stronger. No one tell me what to do. And so I wasn't a victim. I was a culprit. And although I appeared to be a good boy, I wasn't a good boy inside. It's just I had a very strong authority figure over me. And for you children that are homeschooled, you need to realize something. It may be your mother and father's authority and wisdom and even their relationship with Christ that's holding your morality in check or your immorality in check. Just because you're homeschooled or this or that doesn't mean that you're a godly person. You can fake it and not even know that you're faking it. And then when that authority figure is moved out of your life, you become a wild person. Well, no, you don't really become a wild person. You just start manifesting what you've always been secretly. So if you see that in yourself this morning, run to Christ. Amen. Run to Christ. You see. So, I graduated from high school, didn't know what I was going to do. And one day I was at the courthouse for some reason there in town, and my basketball coach and one of the teachers at school, he looked at me and goes, "Hey, Washer, you going into the Army?" I said, "I don't know. Why?" He said, "Because that's the only place you could go, either there or prison." And it made me so mad. He said, "Because you can't function in outside society." And it made me so mad that I went and called a student counselor, even though I'd already graduated, a really nice lady at our school. And I met with her at her home, and I said, "I want to go to the university somewhere." So I got into a university, a good one, small one, but very good. And you know how people will try to glorify in some way, you know, I was a fighter, I was a drinker, I was this, I was that. I was just the most self-centered, egotistical, vain jerk of a person you've ever met in your life. It was just all about me. I wanted to make good grades, to become a lawyer, to make a lot of money. Lifted weights 3 hours a day because I wanted to be bigger and stronger than all the other guys. I did whatever I could do to be the center of attention. I just always wanted to be a superhero. Just vanity. Vanity. And the more you give yourself to that, the more ridiculous you look. Just, you know, the emperor has no clothes. And I just went on with that. And then as you do that, you give yourself more and more over to delusion. And you begin to lie. I was one of the greatest liars you've ever met in your life. I can remember one time lying I went with a friend of mine. He said, "Man, I don't want to work tomorrow. It's going to be so beautiful." I said, "No problem. Let's go talk to our boss." And so I went in there and I made up the biggest story just right off the cuff. One of the biggest lies in the world. And we walked out and my friend looked at me, my best friend, and he says, "You know, you're scary. You are scary." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I knew you were lying and I believed you." And I did that. But one of the most wonderful things is God did not allow my conscience to be seared. The deeper I came into my own vanity, the more I hated myself, the darker I saw myself. And then the working of the Holy Spirit, I'm just everything is a lie. Well, I transferred from the school because I decided that I was going to be an oil and gas lawyer, so I went to the University of Texas. And I thought, this is a new opportunity. I'm going to be a different person when I go there. Well, you know how that went. I was not a different person. It just took a matter of weeks, and I was caught in the same lies. I was having to live something totally fake, just everything. And I just realized I'm trapped. I can't change. And sometimes, and I don't know if you've done this, but I would get up in the morning to go to class. And I can remember just going in, be dark, turn on the light of the bathroom, turn on the shower, and standing there in the shower. And such darkness, not outside in the room, but in me. It was like an absolute hopelessness. Why? I mean, it wasn't a philosophical, why am I alive? It was just darkness. There's no hope. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. And because I loved myself and I wanted to be the center of everyone's attention, I lifted weights. I lived to lift weights. And I was on steroids. And I can remember one night, it was 1 a.m, I couldn't sleep, and I had a bottle of pills in my hands, and I was just looking at them, and I said to myself, I know these wouldn't kill me if I took them all at one time, but I do wish I had something that would do that. I am so miserable. And I kept saying over and over, I remember it was the word, I am the most miserable human being on this planet. And outside, for some of you who may be thinking that the world is really a cool thing, I took a big part in that cool stuff. I mean, I was well known as a guy to hang around with. I always laugh when I think of, I knew very beautiful people, models and this and that, and I always laugh whenever I see a model on a billboard. Because I'll tell young men, you see that beautiful woman there? They say, yeah. I said, I've seen her at 4 a.m. with her head in a toilet throwing up. I've seen her without her makeup. And I've seen that. I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And it's just, unless God sears your conscience, no matter how beautiful that life appears on the outside, it's the most disgusting thing in the world on the inside. And I just knew my life was miserable. But I think the worst thing about it is I knew my life was just a fabrication. It was all a lie. And I knew I was in bondage because someone could ask me a simple question and I couldn't tell them the truth. I would just make up something because I knew I could. And that's why my friend said, man, you're going to make a great lawyer. And I used to think to myself, yeah, I'll end up in jail. Or suicide. I knew I would have. And so I was sitting there on the bed, and it's like 1:30 in the morning, and there's a knock at the door. And I'm like, what that is? So I open up the door, and it was an apartment complex, university students. I open up the door, and there's this guy there about this tall, a freshman, and he's just like shaking. I'm like looking at him, and he said, you're probably going to beat me up. And I looked at him, I said, you're probably right. And he goes, but I got to tell you something. And I'm thinking, man, something's wrong with him. He goes, I got to tell you something. And I said, okay. He goes, I can't take it anymore. I'm afraid of you, but I'm more afraid of God, and I can't take it anymore. I'm like, okay, what? He goes, for 2 weeks, God has been telling me to come over and tell you something, and I've been afraid to do it, but I can't sleep, and I've got to tell you. And I'm like, you're really freaking me out. And I said, okay, look, just kind of funny. I go, okay, what's God got to tell me? This is what he said. You are miserable, and you are going to remain miserable until you surrender your life to Jesus Christ. And I mean, it was like he hit me with a truck. Because I thought to myself, when I was thinking I'm the most miserable human, I wasn't saying that out loud. He couldn't have heard that through the door. And so until about 4:30 in the morning, we just walked around campus, and he would tell me stuff. And I looked at him and I said, look, I know the Catholic Church, and I know the Baptist, and I know they're both on opposite sides. I know both those groups, and I don't want anything to do with any of them. And this is what he said. He said, that's fine. But I'm not talking about Catholic, and I'm not talking about Baptist. I am talking about the person of Jesus Christ. And I'm sorry, you can't escape from this one. What are you going to do with Him? And it really began to, I think about it. I just thought about it and thought about it. And my mom had put an old King James Bible in my suitcase, and I found it in my apartment somewhere, looking for it, had it shoved somewhere. And I opened up the Bible. It was a few days later, and it said this. I opened it up to a passage. It says, man's days are like grass. As the flower of the field, so he flourishes. And the wind passes over him. He is no more. And the place acknowledges him no more. And it made me angry, because I sat there and I went, I know this. This is part of my problem. Because I remember my father. He was very smart, very powerful, very respected. Yet when he died, I remember the funeral, when people came to see that night. I saw men talking about their business, his best friends, some of them even laughing. They were sincere, but it was like my dad died and everybody's gone on with their life. And I thought to myself, that's exactly the way it's going to be with me. It's the way it is with everybody. You're just grass. You die. And so I took the Bible and I just put it down like that quickly. And I just said, basically, thanks God for telling me something I already knew. But then I picked it back up again after a few minutes, and it said, but the loving kindness of the Lord is everlasting on those who fear Him. And the everlasting is the part that just stood out to me. And so I would read some, I would listen to this guy some, and I began to kind of understand something about the gospel. And then one day I'm at the undergraduate library at the University of Texas. We're running off some oil surveys, because we had this team. We competed against other teams there in the university. This classroom situation in which you're these mock-up companies, and you have to do all the different things from oil surveys to accounting. And so we're running off some surveys there. And one of the girls, the only girl on our team, comes up to me and she goes, hey, I'm having a party tomorrow night. Why don't you come? And I had gone through that stage of partying and everything, but I had gotten to the point where I no longer partied. I just went to a bar, a bar, old guys, I just went to a bar. I would sit there and drink myself blind. I could go for 2 weeks without talking to a person. I just didn't care anymore. And I don't even know what drove me to want to get good grades all the time. I guess it was the only reason I had to be alive. And so I looked at her and I said, no, I'm not going to your party. And she looked at me, and all the guys
In this experimental dream I'm whole. Layered voice